everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the Thursday, November 14th meeting of the Planning Board, held here in Town Hall in the Board of Selectmen's room. Briefly go through the agenda for this evening. Tonight at 7:15, first on the agenda, we are continuing our public hearing for 12 Pond Street site review and special permit, which is continued from October 24th, 2019. At 7:45 p.m., we're scheduled to conduct a public hearing on the zoning bylaw amendment for the upcoming town meeting. And then after that, we have one approval not required related to 310 and 320 Pond Street, which we will do. And for those at home and in general, the A&R for 100 to 130 Chestnut Street was withdrawn prior to this meeting, so we will not be discussing that. Subsequent to those, we'll have just administrative matters, perhaps vote on some minutes, but that's the agenda for this evening. So with that said, I'd like to ask the applicant to come up and present for 12 Pond Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Terry Morris. I'm an attorney with offices at 57 Elm Road in Newton, and I'm here representing the petitioner. We are actually pleased to have this opportunity to present the latest iteration in the plans. It's been a lengthy process, but we truly feel that the process has worked well. And after careful consideration, at each and every meeting, which people have spoken, both from the public and members of the respective boards, we've tried to take those things back to our team and incorporate the constructive changes that we've received. I want to just quickly take a progression through the elevations. This was the original scheme that we started with when we first filed, and this was the one that has undergone the most change. That was, let's see here. We went from that previous one to this one was presented. We still had one of the reaction was still that the building was too long, largely because we had kept this central element here and we hadn't really broken up the facade into pieces. You'll notice if we go back to the this plan here, there is no distinction between, other than an attempt to make the ground floor, differentiate the ground floor, which is the commercial space from the residential above. We had the roof line at this height. First one of, so then we basically, there was a lot of comment about how this was really a gateway to Ashland coming from Framingham up 126 or Pond Street. And so we tried to make this a more prominent feature of the building. But again, the reaction was that we needed to do further work, which we have now done. We eliminated this element here, and we actually established the eave line. We brought the eave line down to distinguish the three levels. We also basically took a cue from other projects that had been improved in town, principally the two Main Street projects, and we have used a change of materials, a brick, and some other changes to here to distinguish the ground floor a component from the residential above. We still kept this element here, and let's see if I can navigate. That's not what I want to see. We're full screen mode here. Control L. Control L. Okay. We still kept this element here as being, actually this is a feature that we borrowed from, I think it was 21 Main, where we went away from the basic symmetrical look of the building where, as you saw in the first elevation, and this now became asymmetrical, but we wanted to create a feature, a rather distinctive feature on the corner that hopefully would welcome people into the town. We also, on this side of the building, which was previously quite bland, there was simply a door there to get into a set of stairs, a second means of egress. We obviously established window space over here to take the commercial use around the corner and establish a more prominent central entrance here into the space. The way we achieved that was, let's see, where's the floor plans? The way we achieved that was to, there was also criticism of the fact that initially we had about, I think, a little less than 2,900 square feet of commercial space, and there was criticism that this was viewed as being simply a token to make the building satisfy the requirement of being a mixed-use building with commercial and on the ground floor and residential above. So what we did was we took the parking that had previously been located in these spaces here and expanded the commercial space to go over 4,000 square feet now. And that allowed us to basically create where we principally had two retail units or commercial units. We now have expanding the space, we now are able to create 4. Why is this important? Because again, we wanted this to be a destination point, and if there's 4 different tenants at the site or uses at the site, then there's twice as many reasons for people to want to come to the building and shop and interact. We have let go of the idea of having a restaurant there because the restaurant actually creates its own problems with increased parking, and so we think that this setup is more conducive to the success of the building with less of an impact on the neighborhood that there would be from, say, a restaurant use. But being able to do this now, there was also criticism of parking. And we have 1.5 spaces per units. People got up and said, well, where do you allocate the half space? Well, we do have the capacity here. We still have 32 spaces, 32 spaces for the excuse me, 24 spaces, 24 spaces for the residential use. We have these spaces here within the building, these 16 spaces within the building, and then in the landscape plan, we have additional spaces out here. We have a total of 32 proposed for the residential and 17 for the commercial, which the total project requirement is 41. And we have 51 spaces provided, so we have more than enough spaces. But we're providing the board with some degree of flexibility. If in fact the board feels that that is not enough parking, then we propose to make any one or more of these spaces in here to use stacked parking. We have significant floor-to-ceiling height in the first level to accommodate stacked parking, which would allow us to increase the parking associated with the residential component from 24 to 48, which is 2 spaces per unit. 2 spaces per unit, if you look at other municipalities, is pretty much a standard requirement. And many communities provide waivers to reduce that if based on your location next to public transportation, or whether there's other factors in play, whether there's shared parking involved. So we're not proposing this, but we do leave this open for discussion by the board as to how many spaces you actually want to see on the site. As we have also from the earlier plan, and maybe I'll go back to that, it's worth looking at the scape. Let's see. So far, I've been able to navigate. Let's see now. let's see. That's the earlier plan where you see that we had the parking here that was eliminated to allow us to expand the commercial space. This is our revised landscape plan. Because we were able to now put entries, we have several points of entry into the building, not only the center entrance, which allows people to access the residential space. We all have the capacity of having people, once they're in this lobby area, we could provide direct access into the retail spaces on either side. We also have ability to provide access from the outside, from Douglas or from Greenwich, into the spaces, the retail spaces that are located in the corner. We have significantly increased the open space by this site plan, by eliminating the parking from what we originally proposed, which you may recall was actually three tiers of parking with very little or no landscaping around the perimeter. We think one of the advantages of this is this allows us to give significant landscaping, a landscape strip on two sides here where we have our closest abutter, Mr. Ferreira, to give him some relief from the building. Let's see. Where are we going here? Where's my, here, the landscape plan. How do I navigate this? We do have a plant list. Oh, this is, how do I reduce the size? Emma, how do we reduce the, where? Oh, yes, okay. Yeah, I see it, yeah, right here. Oh, full,
Go over next to the hand,
where, here?
over to the left, right,
Far left?
far right.
Far right. Oh, I see, yep. I don't want to zoom out. It's not working. Anyway, so we do have a landscape plan with actually, huh?
Control L.
Control L, thank you.
Maybe full screen.
Okay, there we go. We have a landscape plan with the planting, the variety, the quantity, sizes, and varieties of plantings are all set forth there now. If I wanted to go back to that planting plan, how do I get there, Emma? Escape, thank you. Okay, now move over. I apologize for me having to take this tutorial while I'm presenting, but I usually don't get the luxury of having to do this. There's our plant list. As I say, the quantities, the species, the locations are actually shown on the plan itself. This was something that had been asked for first by the Design Review Committee, which we responded to. And we think that we hope that you'll find that the plantings are more than adequate to enhance the look of the project. With that, I will. So that is it. So if any, I'm here to answer any questions the board may have.
On the stacked parking, just for clarity, so the proposal is that you would install hydraulic lifts inside, which would bring a car up
Right,
overhead height, and you'd be able to park underneath that.
exactly. Now, we can do that at 1, 2, 3, or how many, and
Yeah.
that actually lends itself to this idea of how you allocate the parking. If you have someone who requires 2 cars, then they would be able to control their own spaces with minimal disruption to the other occupants of the building.
Those systems can be controlled by a tenant safely?
Yes,
You know, you see them
yes.
typically operated,
Right.
by attendants usually.
Correct, yes, they can. They're actually used quite a bit now, especially in urban locations.
Okay.
Do you guys have any, now that you're kind of pivoting from the restaurant, do you have an idea of what you're gonna put in the retail spots?
No, we don't, but I apologize for the fact my client was unable to be here. He had a conflict. He had to attend a meeting in Everett, also before the planning board. So I'm left here to carry the water, so to speak. I honestly don't know, but we hope to, the key thing is we hope to diversify. And I think being able to now have 4 spaces that are on the market, we're reasonably optimistic that we should be able to do that with uses that would be, attract people and yet be a benefit to the immediate neighborhood as well.
I know in terms of the plantings, the design review committee had talked about, made suggestions in terms of native species and things like that around the property. Are those taken into consideration?
Yes, they were.
Those were part of
They were, yes.
that list? Okay.
Yeah. Now, we understand you have a quorum, but we won't be voting tonight. So we're hopeful in the intervening period that we would be able to go back before the design review committee and get their final recommendation to you at the next meeting on December 12th.
Just a couple other things that, notes to go back to some of the design elements. I was wondering about the back entrance for the residents.
Yes.
And obviously, that's just for the residents, right, to kind of pass through the residential parking area. It's not for.
No, that would be open for the public because let me go to that.
So I'm talking about this entrance.
Oh, yeah, I know, yes. That
Like
entrance
yeah,
there would
that
be open to
entrance
the public, because the parking space in the back is largely for the commercial users, and you wouldn't want to force them to have to go all the way out to Douglas and around the corner to get into the building.
So the commercial users in terms of like the owners or workers in those
No,
spaces?
well, it could be users, workers, or it could be patrons. Could be patrons. So I can bring that.
I don't think there's a rendering of the rear. There's an
Yeah.
overhead, right?
One of the other
No,
things we did too, we actually located this
There's a rendering
handicap
in the
parking
back of the
space
building.
closest to the rear entry as
Yeah,
well.
there is. Right there. This is the back.
Ah,
So that's the door I'm talking about.
I thought that was the side, yeah, got it. That was,
Yeah, I think it should be something to be considered, like what that door is, how those doors are used. I can see the argument about how, letting, whatever the customers say, whatever the stores these are. So not a worker, but a customer coming
Right,
to these
yes.
stores. And, but I'm wondering about separating like residences and residential and, into their parking lot and more of their private space and the population coming through. I thought in the progress of this, which has been design review committee and here, and obviously it's a long process, I thought the sidewalk along the side was supposed to be leading from that parking space to the front of the building where you'd use the front entrances. In some of the earlier studies on Pond Street and the Cecil report and things like this, they really talked about, I think, like getting people to the front of the building, getting people to the street instead of coming in the back door. So I assume that door, given that it's kind of quiet nature, it's not really, it's a very quiet door, was meant just for the residences to kind of slip in, and have that access. So that's just something I would.
So as we look, are you suggesting then that if someone's parking here and wants to patronize the commercial space, that they would then come up this walkway here? They
Yeah, I
could
thought-
come up this walkway here and get in that side entrance.
I thought, yeah, that was my understanding from the process, which I could be wrong, that sidewalk was to get people from that parking lot to the front of the building, and then you're using the main entrances from the building, or are they meant to kind of go through and go right out onto the street and then come back in? That's, kind of my question. And I understand if you're not able to
Yeah,
answer
no,
it, maybe it's
I
a
mean,
question that you pass on.
I say one of the focuses of the most recent change was to put some life on that Douglas corner. And also on the other corner. That's why we created this, sort of more usable space for people to not just have to walk through. And we do know that as part of the redesign or reconstruction of 126, that there are going to be sidewalks, extensive sidewalks out here on Pond Street. If you want us to, and we did talk about, putting a sidewalk on Douglas, you will recall. There was considerable discussion about whether Douglas was wide enough and if in fact, we haven't consulted with the DPW, but if in fact it's shown that Douglas is wide enough to do that, then we would create a regular, public sidewalk along Douglas Road that would allow people to get from here all the way to the front of the building. That was the connection that I recall.
Okay.
Because, the discussion on Douglas and how to improve, whether to improve that, only has come up in the last meeting or two. And that's what we were talking about. Some people took issue with the fact about whether it was wide enough. There was some criticism in a previous hearing that it wasn't wide enough for emergency vehicles. I think some members went out and actually looked at that, or and thought that it could accommodate it. So I do know that you require a certain minimum width to establish a roadway, but as I said, my client is certainly willing at his cost and expense to install a sidewalk with curbing along that access to allow for a safer route to get to Pond Street.
But there's a walkway already there, right? I mean, you have a walkway.
The entire site is asphalt, other than the building. There is no sidewalk.
No, I mean on your diagram.
Yes.
Like there's a walkway there from the
There's a
parking-
walkway here,
Right.
internal.
To basically get you,
That's an internal walkway.
what do you mean by internal?
Well, I mean, it's on our site.
Right.
As
right.
opposed to out here, which would be public.
Right.
Public walkway.
I think it's just a means of thinking about, and I'm not sure if we're talking about it cross purposes or not, but it's a means of thinking about these are, that your customers are parking in this lot,
Right.
and how do we get them in the building through the front door
Mm-hmm,
instead of a little back door,
right.
right? Which I think is more in keeping with the studies on Pond Street, the Cecil report, the overlay district. You know, how do you enliven the street versus slipping everyone in a back door,
No,
which also then goes through a parking area, and is that?
No, I'm smiling because I attended a special permit hearing in Newton the other night where they had just spent they approved a big project on Route 9 called The Street. And no, it was actually on Needham Street. I don't know if you know anything about Newton, but Needham Street's a major corridor where they had put a lot of retail space on what was previously zoned for industrial. And one of the petitions came in and wanted to allow people to come in from the back door, and there was a lot of discussion around the same thing you're talking about. I think in this instance, we can then control that back door. We can make it so that it's only accessible by the occupants of the building, the residents, rather than the general public, so that would require people to go around. It's the only way we can do it is to establish some control of the entry point.
Right, I'm just thinking like the garage is controlled because there's a garage door on
Right,
it.
exactly,
So
right.
it's just for residents to go through. And so it's more of a, from a design perspective, how you're separating, look, a couple things, how you're separating public from private,
Right.
in the project. And then how if you're going through all this effort to create this activity on the street,
You want people there.
and then we're sticking them through the back door,
No.
right? How do you get them on the street, It's a few more steps, yeah, it's good
I
exercise.
couldn't agree with you
They
more.
can walk.
I couldn't agree with you more. And if you wanted, we view this process as a cooperative effort.
Mm-hmm.
We generally rely, my experience has been in venues like this, is that these permits, when they're issued, have a number of conditions, and those conditions are designed to try to achieve the objectives that you're talking about. So if one of the conditions is that back entry should only be for the residents of the building, we would accept that limitation if you feel that's what's necessary to achieve the objective to put life on the street.
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking for what's the best solution for not only for this individual project, but for the goal as a whole. When we talk about Pond Street development, what's
Right.
our goal? Like, what's our vision about how these buildings operate? And so if I start seeing a row of buildings and everyone parks in back and everyone's slipping into the back door, no one's on the street, right?
Right, I agree.
So it's that kind of, looking at the things that have been approved at town meeting, the studies that the town has paid for and that the residents have talked about again and again about life on the street. How do we make those happen by a simple, who has access, who has a residential card and gets to go through the door, and goes around to the street? Like, it's kind of thing. So it's more just a look at, hey, it's a looking at that question, not necessarily I'm saying, hey, you need to do this because I know it's the right answer, but what's the message the building is sending is for different types of people with different relationships to this building?
It's not, ultimately, it's not my decision, I'm only the representative, but
I understand.
But given
Yeah.
my past experience on sitting on a board of this nature, I would agree wholeheartedly with what you say, that would be my recommendation to the client. So, as they say, no mas.
And I guess that's what, I just thought that that's what was happening as I looked at these plans, and
Yeah.
maybe I just missed something along the way. But I also think that ties into that public space, along that same side, that we kind of talk about as a small open space, but an open space. And as we have, if anyone has looked at pocket parks in urban areas, pocket parks in New York, I think there's probably some springing up in Boston, that you don't have to have a lot of area to make a space that activates an urban area or a busier street. It just has to be designed properly. So when I see that a sidewalk coming from the parking to this corner part of the building, which is now a gateway, into Ashland. It is one of the first properties as you make your way into Ashland, and it has to kind of own that role. How do you make that activated? It's kind of like the corner spot, in downtown Ashland, where it's just a little park, right? But as you come into Ashland, it's like it's activated. It's like, what is that? What are people doing there? Right? So you're activating that corner. It doesn't have to be big. And that's why I think the design, so another comment is like, how does that corner get designed? And I don't, in the same way that the landscape get designed, like I don't think it's a sidewalk through grass that kind of ends in a little area with a few benches and goes in. It's a special area, and I'm not sure what it is, but it's someplace that people would say, hey, I'll meet you at, for lack of a better term, the corner spot. Right? And we'll go on our walk from there, or then we'll go to wherever we're going, right? It's this little meeting place. And it has the potential to give that, it's not big, but it has the potential to give that little bit of something back to the community. Let's make it into something. It's a little mini design project. And I don't think it's there yet in the project, but I think it has potential. I think it's right in the right spot to have potential. So, and that's just, again, I don't expect you to answer that. That's a message for you to pass on.
Okay.
So-
Thank you.
Oh, and the two other things, unless someone wants to jump in. Two other things is that I think you need to look at, if it hasn't been looked at closely already, is the amount of glazing on the commercial space and the doors into the commercial space, because I think the Pond Street Overlay District dictates 50% on commercial areas that should be glazing. In some communities they dictate even 70%. So especially for those commercial spaces that are closer to the middle, the middle, they have less glazing. It's more like a glass door and like two more residential windows. So you may need even both design-wise and according to the overlay district regulations, those might need more glass on those commercial spaces, right? The parts that are in the brick.
Yep.
So we're talking about these two pieces right
Right here, you're talking about right here?
Yes.
Well, right there, clearly we have enough glazing.
Right, and I think it's kind of overall, but it's something to look at, like,
Yeah.
will those commercial spaces be as attractive, when
Okay.
they look a bit residential, and to get that really storefront, that window shopping, that activates the street. And then one other thing is just 'cause I haven't heard it mentioned, and again, I may have missed it, there's a lot of notes on this project, is that the overlay district also requires the building to be Energy Star certified.
Yeah, these are, all
Okay,
these
so
are
that you're
certified.
already aware that that's already,
That's a given.
that's already part of your
Yeah.
process, great.
So, on this front view, the top image, the the 4 black dots above on the roof line, those are air conditioning units, correct?
No, it's the solar panels. Those are solar panels.
I think,
Those
I
squares
think.
are solar
I
panels? The
believe. Let
solar-
me,
the
see if I
roof-
have a roof plan. I
Yeah,
should
you
have a roof
do,
plan, yeah.
and those look like AC units.
Oh, going the wrong way.
Solars are on the rear, I think.
I think the solar's on the flat.
There's the roof plan.
So which is the Pond Street side? The top?
The Pond Street side would be the bottom, I would think. Wouldn't it? Yes. Yeah.
No,
No,
it's
you
usually,
tell me.
it's usually the same orientation, it's probably the top.
Nope, the top, excuse me, the top is actually abutting, Pond Street.
Okay,
And
this is
the
the Pond Street side?
Yes, that's the
Okay,
Pond Street side,
yeah.
yep. And then the bottom would be the rear elevation.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Look,
So if you could go back to the rendering of the front, please.
Want to go back to the elevation?
Yes, please.
This one,
A5.
Yep,
please.
that one, A5.
I mean, there's been I know there's been a lot of work on this to get this to this point, from design review and the developer, and I thank the design review very much for the effort and the meetings I've already spent on this. So I don't mean these comments to be, you know, negative, but it surprises me to see those still visible from the front of the building. And
I think that they're visible from this elevation, vantage point,
yeah,
but if you
you're
won't
standing on the
see-
ground in front of the building.
You see
can't
how
it.
they're set back, they're set back on the roof plan pretty far, so that you won't see them from the street. You won't see them from across the street. You'd have to be pretty far away to see them, and by that point, they would recede into the horizon.
So so from this vantage in this elevation, where exactly are you standing? Like, where would you see them? You'd be
Well,
like in a,
This is two-dimensional. So,
there's no angle, 2-dimensional.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So really, these are
the-
just
the site,
representation.
because they're set back, just in the same way, if you have a
Yeah, they're
building and you
set
set back the second floor or the third floor, you set them back, you can't see them initially.
Yeah, I mean, they're
And
set back
this
half the
is,
roof
if we
line.
go back to,
Yeah, I assume as long as they are shown in the model, like if those air conditioning units are represented in the model, then when we look at the perspectives should be accurate about whether we see those things or not.
So like
you
that.
see where they're located?
Yeah,
This is
they're-
the
they're
roof
set
plan.
back
They're
quite a bit.
located in the center
Yeah.
of the roof.
Yeah.
So my point is, they're set back from a sight line standpoint, they're set back pretty far.
Yeah,
If you go to R3, which would be the perspective rendering view, they do disappear.
Yeah,
R3, there you go.
yeah.
it's just about making sure that, that they're shown, you know, just in terms of when you're making these three-dimensional models, which I do, right? Is that if the layer isn't, if the air conditioning units aren't on in the view, then of course you're not gonna see them,
Yeah.
right? So we're assuming that is there and you actually can't see them from the perspective. So, but it's a valid question to make sure
Yes.
that you can see them, yeah, or not. But it's very likely that, like, 'cause they're so far back and so high up that you,
They would not be visible.
yeah, if you look at your own house, there's stuff you can't see on your own roof, you know?
And then the front overhang, just understanding the dimension of that, that's a small overhang of a couple of feet, or
Yes, I think it's,
the front on view looks like it's longer and larger, but
you mean the Garrison look.
the red overhang.
Garrison look.
Nope, in the center of the building.
Oh, this there?
That overhang, yeah.
That, I think that's part of the portico that,
Excuse me,
to
sorry?
establish the entrance.
No, I understand what it is. I'm saying, how far does it come out from the front of the building?
How far out does it extrude from the side of the building?
I would have to go to another,
That's fine.
that's the first floor plan. That's the, that's the first floor plan showing the parking. It doesn't extend any further than that line there, if that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Because the building is recessed. building is recessed at that point at the entryway. You see how it steps in?
Yeah, no, and that's why
Yeah,
it's part of
and
why
that-
it
and
gets
so-
in that view a little bit, right, because it's.
That roof, mini roof line, what you call it, would be filling in that space,
Yeah.
that space in there.
Cool, right. A3. Same thing with this. It's not an issue
I think it's the elevator tower.
on the elevation, right? The back.
Yeah, well, it'd be interesting to. We're just talking about just to make sure you can hear us, we're talking about the elevator tower also and on the roof. When we look at the elevations, you can't see them on this perspective, but when we look in the elevations, you can see that elevator tower. And it's all a matter of perspective
thing.
about how thing is taken. But we can't take the drawings as a given.
Correct.
But it's very likely that you can't see those things from any reasonable.
Any observable vantage point.
That's right, that's right.
Well, there it is. That actually is a little closer to the front, but still, probably.
It's a little closer, but if we had if there was one thing I would recommend is for the architect to provide is a section through the building.
Section,
like
okay.
a cut section.
Mhm.
And then you can actually, and especially if you can see that elevator tower.
And you can see the relationship between the top
You
and the,
can can see exactly
and the
where you can
corners.
stand, how far back you have to be to see it.
you can do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So easy cut to make.
And for what it's worth, I mean, I think Trish's points about the back door I would be on board with.
We're good.
With that.
We're
yeah,
good with that.
So.
The other thing I'm wondering is just about the entrances, now that there's four commercial units, is the entrance from the end ones just on the side? Is that,
We have the capability through the floor plan, actually, let me go to that, if I can find it. Okay, so, did I lose my, map on my, there it is. So we have the capability of having entryway, if these are separate spaces, we could have an access directly from the sidewalk, again, contributing to life on the sidewalk. From the side, we don't show it now, but we could have access from the lobby. But if we want to segregate the residential from the commercial, then it would not make sense to do that. So we would have doors into each of the spaces here, and the corner spaces would have a second entrance on the side streets.
right, and those spaces, the ones that use, like from the lobby, if you gave those access from the lobby, which I'm not sure you should do, because it seems like, again, the private space for the,
Right,
but those two commercial spaces that are on either side of the lobby, they already have access from the street.
Correct.
They already have a double door in, they really
Right.
don't need that access at
right,
all.
right.
It's more those two end units, like, do they get the doors in from the street when we talk about the street, or are people just coming in from the side? And I think it's just going from the 2 units to the 4 units that just hasn't been looked at. Like, okay, now there's two places for signage on the front of the building. Well, what
Right.
if there's 4 businesses? Like, and it's kind of hard to predict, because one you might get one tenant that wants 2 spaces, right? And there isn't a wall in between, or
Right.
kind of. So it's a little hard to predict, but it's kind of thinking through the various flexibility of the scenarios, I guess, of
I think
how
right,
those
yeah, right
entrances might
now
be
we
provided.
show an entry there. The middle commercial units are accessed on either side from the street right there. It's not clear from these vantage points whether, I mean, that right there could be a door or it could be a window. It shows as a window, so which means you'd have access only from the side streets. We're open to any suggestions you have about how to treat the entry to those spaces, again, to achieve the objective of putting, quote, life on the street.
Yeah, I just think that in commercial spaces, they change all the time, from a commercial area having one bay and then they move out and somebody else has 3 bays, you know, and so that's just the nature of, yeah, it's the nature of residences as well. We change them all the time, right?
Right.
So how do you have the flexibility to accommodate one business that might come in and, you know, maybe in the end you will only have 2 businesses, but they want a lot more space. Great, you know. But how do you accommodate that flexibility in the design of the building? And again, those aren't, I'm not expecting you to answer those questions, just pass them on to Mr. Chen.
I guess we would design the fenestration on the front of the building so that it could be convertible.
Into a
That was
into
my
a
instinctive
storefront
reaction.
door,
Right.
yeah.
Phil, do you have anything to add?
So, if there's no further questions from the board, we'd open this up for public discussion, public comment.
Good evening,
Evening.
Mark Sony.
If
I,
you want me to change one of the pictures,
let me know.
I'll change it. Which one do you want me to bring up?
pick up the first floor.
Bring up the what first?
The ground.
Okay, sure.
There you go. Almost.
Okay,
There you go. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, because my questions, you're gonna trust me with this.
Try to be helpful.
I hope. Okay,
You're doing better than I was.
those right here I'm pointing with the light is entrance, entrance,
Yes,
entrance,
yes,
entrance.
yes.
How wide is that right there, the width to drive through?
It'll be 24 feet, 24 feet, Mr. DeSoni.
And the entrance is, to enter, how high is the height for those entrances?
So the garage door, you're saying?
Yep.
Try and mark.
No problem.
Note that Sarah Hines said the design review committee asked for an 8-foot door, 8-foot garage. But an 8-foot garage, 8-foot high garage door. I thought that was the question.
From that answer out here to the planner, what does it say?
Mr. DeSoni, I'm looking at the cross-section of the detail on A6. It is not identified as a height measurement. However, looking at it, eyeballing the measurement, I would probably say 8 feet. The garage door will be 8 feet tall, which is a common measurement for a garage door structure of this nature.
And side width?
24 feet.
The garage door will be 20 feet wide.
Would those be wide enough for any emergency vehicles to come through?
This plan will be looked at by all departments, I would say, Mark.
Because in case anything happens inside, they have to have room unencumbered, uninterfered.
Yep.
To get through.
Mhm.
Okay, now, we're talking, the other one's about the sidewalks.
Yeah, what do you want, what do you need now?
The sidewalk, the
Side-
streets.
The street?
Yeah.
Oh, side plan, okay. I think I might be going the wrong direction.
That's okay.
That one?
Yep.
Okay.
That'd be good enough. Now, next, I'm having fun, is this. Not the front, but the sides. Okay, the sidewalk that's connected. Are those sidewalks on the inside part of the lot design or flush against the streets?
Those sidewalks are designed to be on the public, in the public way, not on our land
So they're on the outside,
or our site.
so let's say that's the outside of the sidewalk on each road. That would be what the curbs would be on and the
Can you
sidewalk
go to
access?
R2, the rendering for R2?
And we-
That would show him it would
R2?
give him a sense
Okay,
of that.
Sorry, Mark.
No problem.
Please, thank you.
It's good to have the help.
Absolutely. R2.
Okay. Now, the sidewalks and the roads, how wide are the sidewalks planning to be?
Well, we haven't consulted with the town DPW, but according to whatever their specifications are, we would construct them according to the town specs for a public sidewalk.
That'd be correct.
Okay? And that would, it would fit the width of the road from side to side for incoming traffic, oncoming traffic, plus coming out to Pond Street and coming out from the side entrance, there's still got to be a sidewalk curb cuts.
Well, that was one of the items that was discussed, which was, you know, would the road accommodate the addition of sidewalks there? Or, you know, would they be necessary? Would it make the road more passable to not have them, but there are would still be sidewalks on the property of of the applicant?
Okay, and now, a question that's not gonna be on any of the slides. Well, does this coincide with the town bylaw driveways or a shorter than driveway zone codes?
I don't understand the question.
Because the bylaw zone, the town here has a driveway for any amount of vehicles, number of vehicles, for each site to have parking. But they also have a length by feet.
Okay. Yeah, this will have to meet all town bylaws, Mark.
Okay, and I would say probably last one. Traffic study, that's peer. And the positive thing I want to end with, okay, that I want to end with is the change to the ground floor where the parking is and not knowing what could be coming in is it's commercial, retail, whatever. But it can be our future marketable businesses could fit in. It would help.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mark.
So were you saying in that rendering that sidewalk there is currently, like, would be Douglas Road right now?
So that sidewalk is in the rendering, that's outside.
Yeah, so but like that right now, as it like today, that's Douglas Road that they're walking on in the
With-
picture.
So with that, so that's outside of their property limit, I would
Okay.
say. Yeah, they're looking to consult with the DPW and myself to see if there's enough room along the roadways to implement that.
What I'm saying though is like, if those people were standing there right now, at this very moment, they'd be standing on Douglas Road.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, they'll be on
And-
Douglas Road.
And today, the road runs straight into the parking lot. There's
Yeah,
no
yeah.
curb or any sidewalk.
So that will be proposed, will be curbing and a differential between the road and the sidewalk.
Okay.
Yeah, the folks on the front of the building, in front of the building, would be walking on a new sidewalk, which is gonna be implemented, as part of the 126, tip project, which will, be coming through and will be starting fairly soon.
Hi, Julie Nardone, 86 Elliott Street. My husband's an architect. He worked at some New York and Boston firms, and he showed me a lot about buildings and symmetry. And I gotta tell you, that building looks very Frankenstein to me. Is that what you really want the gateway of Ashland to look like? I feel that every time I come to this meeting, it feels like we're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. It's too big. It's so obviously too big. for the space that it's in. I feel like it's Cinderella slipper. You know, her stepsisters are trying to get their 2 big feet into the slipper. They're cutting off their toes and their heels, and they're making a bloody mess. And I just feel like the emperor has no clothes. I wish someone would just say, you know what, it's too big. I think the neighbor, I personally, of course, I'm a historic preservation buff and would rather see the historic building. But if the neighbors have said they're open to making it smaller, I don't know if you can get rid of this affordable housing part that seems to be driving this to be way too big for what it is. The other thing is, and I see it all the time, our leaders, management, and select board, I mean, they have made statements on Facebook. They're pushing this like they push most everything. And if you look at their track record, I'm not sure why anyone would listen to them. We've got Robert Hill Way, which is just a tragedy. We've got the Rail Transit District, lost the view. High Street looks horrible. And I saw this board with some different members on it. You know, first they were fast tracking it. Then when the people found out about it, the RTD district, it was being fast tracked. Then when the people around it, it was being slow tracked. We've got the other RTD with the 4 stories that it looks too big. And it's like, I don't know where we're going with this town. And you're listening to people who, if they had a great track record and these things looked really great, I'd say, okay, maybe that sounds good. But you're listening to people who don't have a very good track record. And I don't know. All I have to say is I think it doesn't fit. You keep calling it a city. It's not a city. This road is almost mainly wetlands. It'll never be a city. The little pocket park, I mean, is that where the sidewalk would go? Because Douglas Street, I believe, is too narrow. We can pretend it isn't, but the neighbors have already said emergency vehicles have a hard time getting up there. Would the sidewalk go over this? And how wide is this pocket park? Like, how many feet is it?
Pocket parks often take place in the space of a one parking space when they do these in
How
various
big
cities.
is this park? How big is this
looks-
pocket park?
Like it's 20 feet at the narrowest part, and then must be 80 feet long.
It'd be
And-
20 feet from the building to the end of the property, and then if there's a sidewalk, that would then go from there, but 20 feet.
Okay. And will the sidewalk go into this pocket park?
Could we, do we want to go to L1 so we could point?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's undetermined. I think as they were saying that they need to talk to DPW to see how wide the road is, if there's room for a sidewalk. I think that's kind of unknown at this point, if there's sufficient width on Douglas for a separate sidewalks off of the proposed property.
Probably some of the neighbors can speak to that, but I believe those are very narrow roads, and the fact that you could put a sidewalk and make it like, I don't know, I don't think that makes sense. But anyways, you're down talking about the nitty gritty here, which makes me think you're all voting for it. And it's like, can you tell me, like, what is the benefit of this to Ashland?
I think when we start to look at, and I don't think anyone here is, I'm trying to look at everything very objectively. I've talked to some commercial business owners.
Actually, I'm going to sit down
Okay.
while you say thank you.
I've talked to residents. I've talked to, we went on a tour of the residential neighborhoods. I've driven around various parts of Ashland, looking at the scale of different buildings, comparing them to the scale of this area and how close residents are. I've compared this building to other buildings that are both existing in Ashland, new buildings and old buildings. So it's a lot of homework trying to figure it out. I think the critical thing to understand is that there's nothing on this street or that's going to be put on this street that is looking to fit in with the existing streetscape. I think all the studies that have been going on for the past 20 years, the Cecil report, the overlay district, the various town meetings that have happened for, I don't know, as long as I've been in Ashland, I think, all of these things are saying what's here isn't working. Not the residential neighborhoods, that they're quiet and they're obviously loved, but this street, that there is no context on this street that people are trying to match, saying, hey, I love that, let's make something exactly like it. So if it seems like that a building presented seems out of scale, there's really nothing to compare it to there. So the only thing we have to compare it to, when I look at these documents for, the Pond Street revitalization and the Cecil report and all these things and the whole district that came out of those studies, is the vision. So when I'm reading those documents, I'm looking for the vision that people discussed during those meetings. I think I went to one, and I wasn't involved in the rest. I didn't even live here for some of it. I'm looking for the vision that was being established by the residents of Ashland, the people that went to those meetings, and the people that then voted for it at town meeting to create this overlay district. And so when I look at all that information, I cannot rule out that this building doesn't fit with that vision. So I encourage people to find these documents online and read through them as I have numerous times, and so as a planning board member who is trying to look at this objectively, not just from the people in the room, but all the people that were at those meetings and voted for these things at town meeting, that's the vision I'm trying to establish and weigh this against. I hope that explains at least the direction I am coming from on it.
Yeah, I think that was well stated. That this is an application, and we all need to kind of look at it as an application, as in someone is trying to make an investment into the community within the bylaws that have been generated by the people of Ashland.
I would also add, though, that from my perspective as well, I think I've been on this board for a little over a year, and the number one thing that I've seen people react to is the size of the storage facility in front of the middle school. And it's not so much that people are always loud about what they like, but they're very loud about what they don't like. So I'm also looking at this, and I get that maybe everybody doesn't love this, but there's also other potentials that are worse, I think, that I'm trying to also weigh out. You have more knowledge of this than I do. If they were to put a 40B there, I mean, is there anything to prevent them from putting a 40-unit building there with no parking?
It's a hypothetical. That's
But
what
is there
it comes
anything to
down
stop them from doing that?
But no, Ashland is under the state mandated 10%,
Right.
and a 40B could come in, and then the town would be taking that. However, that's a hypothetical, and I don't really want to get down that
I know it's a
kind of road.
hypothetical,
But yeah, you could be kind of having a different conversation, and it wouldn't be in front of the planning board; it would be in front of the zoning board, and it would change the application. But yeah, it could. Is it a possibility? Yes.
So I would ask Mr. Moore, have you worked with Mr. Zumuto on other projects before? Has he typically lost money on projects?
I don't know his financial
No.
condition. I know he pays my bills.
He's usually pretty successful at them. My guess would be that if we didn't, I don't envision that he's intending on losing money, and including all these revisions, that there is in the back of my head, considering what I would not want to see is something like what happened on the middle, with the middle school, and people being like, why is this, that would be hard to explain why we got to the point of that. So, that's also something that I'm factoring in when I consider all of these things, is that maybe we don't find the best possible thing to make everyone happy, which doesn't exist, but I also am very cautious of ending up in the worst possible situation as well.
Okay.
So.
Rose Flaherty, 18 Douglas Road. I actually would very much like to address the two things that you both just said, and I disagree with you 100%. I don't think we should be approving this project based on the fact that it's somewhat possible that a worse project could come along. It should be taken on its merits and its effect on the neighborhood, and not anything else. I I just completely lost my train of thought on what you were saying about the size of the building. I've been saying this over and over again, and I feel like I'm not being heard by anybody, and it's getting frustrated. Yes, we do think the building is too big. Yes, we do understand that it needs to be changed, and we're not trying to so much get it to fit into the context of the neighborhood now, but we're trying to get it to fit in density-wise. This is a densely packed neighborhood. I actually, have a photo. This is how densely packed this neighborhood is compared to everywhere else on this street. And that is the size of the lot that we're trying to put this on. Everybody else, take a look at that. As I said before, there's the same number of units in this building as there are houses on Douglas Road and houses on Greenhalgh Road. So you're basically doubling the number of residences on Greenhalgh Road. You're doubling the number of residences on Douglas Road. They're already densely packed. They already have a lot of parking issues. The bottom line is just, it's not about we want it to fit into the neighborhood context. It's about we want to make sure it enhances the neighborhood rather than being a detriment to the neighborhood. We want to make sure that it's not going to be crowded, overcrowded, cars everywhere. And along that line, I'm the one who brought up the emergency vehicles on Douglas and Greenhalgh Road. They are wide enough for that, and they are probably wide enough to accommodate that with a sidewalk. The concern is people parking up and down our street that are at this building. That will cause a problem with not just emergency vehicles, any vehicles. If you look on the back of that sheet with that map, I've taken pictures of how narrow it gets because people are parked all over the street. It's simply putting too many people into too small a space that's already densely crowded. I understand that they've been trying to hear our concerns and they've been trying to address our concerns. I also understand that they're businessmen and they're trying to make a profitable building. But the bottom line is with the size of that building and the number of people both working in it, living in it, and being patrons at it, there's just no way to provide enough parking that people aren't going to be parked on our street. I do ask for a clarification about the parking because you talk about there being 50 spaces or 51 spaces, and you talk as if adding the stacked parking will add to that. And I'm confused. But
Parking over every one of those spaces inside the building, would have a space on top of it.
so maybe I misunderstood you because it just sounded like you said if you added the stacked parking that would increase that number.
Yes.
It would go
But
from,
there's only 35 there now. It would bring it up to 50.
So, excuse me, this
17 also in the parking.
there's 17
Correct.
spaces that are within the building, and
Yeah.
they are proposing stacked parking, which are mechanical lifts. So you could
Yes.
pull your car in, the mechanically, hydraulic,
Lift the
lifts would lift the car up, and then you could pull a car underneath. And so
No, I understand.
you would double that 17, multiply it by 2, and then obviously you would double the parking of those 17 spaces.
I think
I understand that.
she's asking if it's the 51 includes the stacked or not
No,
the stacked. Oh.
it does include, no, I know that, because
the
here's what I'm
proposed-
saying, is the way it was stated a little while ago was we can add the stacked parking as an option.
So the 51,
The
excuse me.
51
the
spaces
51
includes the stacked parking.
The stacked parking, yes.
Without that stacked parking, there's only 35 spaces total, including handicapped and everything. Or maybe 36, I might have forgotten one space.
I mean, I think,
But
Correct.
yeah.
I just want it to be clear that that's not an option. That would have to be part of it in order to get that kind of parking.
Do you want more
I
parking
st-
or not?
No, I'm not, I'm just saying I'm just making everybody realize that that's not in addition to the 50, that's included in the 50.
And just
Or
to
51.
look at, to speak to this, the development as proposed today, would require 41 parking spaces,
No, I know.
including the stacked parking, lifts that number up to the proposed 51 spots.
And I do understand that they're giving more than the required. Again, I'm talking real world application. I'm not talking and I understand that they're doing their best to increase that.
Yep.
I'm still just talking real world and how it's gonna be, and the size of the building, the number of people in the building, the number of parking that's able to be there because of the size of the building, is simply not gonna be adequate to not have cars parked on our streets. That's a fact. That's just how it's gonna be. My last question is about the commercial spaces, which, you know, when we talked last time, they talked about there being restaurants there. What is our assurance that, we talk about 4 spaces now, 4 smaller spaces, which is very, very different than 2 larger spaces. 4 roughly 1,000 square foot spaces is much different than having one be 2,200 square feet. What is our assurance that after this is all said and done and approved, that a restaurant doesn't get put into that 2,200 square feet anyways and end up causing the parking problems that we've all been?
We need an amendment to the permit.
So the permit itself wouldn't allow a restaurant unless that was then
Correct. The
brought
planning
forward
board,
again.
theoretically,
Okay.
speaking of theoretical issues, yes, the planning board is a special permit, and the special permit could involve a condition, a special condition, which would cite that no restaurant use shall be allowed in the proposed building, due to the planning board's fear of parking issues. Be as bland as that statement. And you could also say, if a proposed restaurant would be proposed, the applicant or owner of the building therefore would have to come to the planning board for a modification. However, improving that parking is acceptable upon that point, but the planning board does have that power, I would say, to put a condition in the decision, which would eliminate any potential use for a restaurant, I would say. And in
Any use you don't want.
in anything, yeah, in any, restaurants are allowed use within the commercial highway district, but the planning board can just not put that in, and therefore the applicant would not be putting in a grease trap or any, I would say, mechanical equipment that would allow a restaurant to enter into that.
And the lack of
Personally,
that,
I'd much rather have 4 commercial spaces in a restaurant and not 16 apartments, but clearly, those of us who think that are in the minority when it comes to the people who have the power to make the decision. What was the last thing I wanted to ask? Shoot. Oh, the last time we were here, I asked a question, and obviously nobody had an answer because it was the first meeting. But what will be done to make sure that there is not a parking issue on our street?
Regarding on your street,
Douglas Road, Washington, Greenhalgh, Walshacum, all the surrounding streets.
I think that the number one thing that, I've spoken to the town manager is enforcement. And if there is a parking issue, obviously, we can have a side conversation about this, but I can request and bring this up to the police department that parking is seen as an issue. There also could be, taken to the Board of Selectmen, and there could be, I would say proposed measures to eliminate overnight parking. I don't know the policies within Ashland regarding overnight parking, winter overnight parking. However, there are no policies. And so therefore, what is enforceable, what isn't enforceable? If parking is an issue on public ways, then the police would have to be notified and enforcement. And then obviously policies would have to be put forth through the Board of Selectmen. That's what I can answer for you. However, I'm still looking into if there are policies that exist or not, I would say.
What about us getting signs on the streets that say parking for Douglas Road residents only? Parking for Greenhalgh Road residents only?
That could be acceptable, and, that you know, we could I can continue that conversation off to the side with you, with the police department.
And that would need to involve the Board of Selectmen too.
Correct. Once you're involving a public
Which-
street, you
which-
involve the
which-
Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
Which, if this goes forward, we can put that into the condition as well, to make a recommendation that the Board of Selectmen engage on this topic, if that gets to that point.
Mm-hmm.
And my last comment is that, you know, this, I have to second a lot of the things that Julie was just saying. You know, we keep talking about the sidewalks and all the details, and we're not addressing the fact that this is too big. Again, we're not trying to get something that's in context with the neighborhood. We know they're old houses. We know things are gonna change. We are not trying to fight change. People keep saying that too, and we're not trying to do that. We're just trying to get something that's going to enhance the neighborhood, not be a detriment to the neighborhood. No offense, just, you know, it's simply too dense in too densely populated an area.
But you don't believe that landscaping, sidewalks,
I don't think with the size of that
Right.
building, you can do anything that's good. You're putting 1,300 square foot residences. That's basically taking all of Douglas Road and putting it in that one building. It's taking all of Greenhills Road and putting it in that one building. Those apartments are the size of our homes. It's just too much. And there's just not enough space to handle all that. That's all. And it's not a given project, it's a special permit. You have every opportunity to reject this and look for a smaller building. Thank you.
Hello, Janet Platt, 11 Rodman Road. I did go to every single overlay district meeting. It was kind of exciting to dream about what could be on our kind of our street of hope, you know? Like, it's an opportunity street, I get that. None of us were looking for the opportunity to have it paved with apartments. And so when we ask that this be something different, we're asking because it wasn't the vision that we put our sticky dots on. Nobody did, okay? Like, nobody said, please give us tall apartments that go right up to the street and make you feel like you're in a city. So it's nice that there's more commercial space. We've gone from 12% to, I think, 14%. It's still an apartment building, and we still want to see it smaller. We want to see less people. I want to living there and competing with us for the same resources. Everybody that's not from our neighborhood has multiple ways to get in and out of their street. They do not have to go to the same major road to get out of their neighborhood. The people on Greenhalgh and Douglas have to go out Greenhalgh and Douglas to 126. If there are twice as many people lined up in the morning waiting to get out, then there are twice as many people that they have to wait with every morning. And that's the same for Saturdays. It's already tough to get out, but doing this to our neighborhood isn't just sort of saying, yeah, we've decided you're gonna be the city neighborhood. You're also just kind of, you're not giving us, we don't have a different way to go. We can't go out the back way. There's wetlands behind, and then a railroad tracks, and then it's Sherborne. So it's not something you can fix later. And then the other thing I want to say is that the storage space is big and ugly, or whatever, or it's big and beautiful, whatever it is. It was allowed, though. That's the thing, right? This requires a special permit. They can't just do that. You could build a 5-story office building. I get that. This requires a special permit, and that is different. It's supposed to enhance our neighborhood. Not just enhance Ashland, but do something wonderful for our neighborhood. And so when we're up here saying, oh my God, it's too big, can you please make it smaller? What we mean is, oh my God, it's too big. Can you please ask them to make it smaller?
nothing is enforced in the town of Ashland except the payment of taxes. These cars will be parked everywhere, and I think everybody knows that. And one final thing, I think this town is really mean-spirited. I do. You know, you just don't care about the people that live here. And that's why we have a really hard time forming community in this town. And if you think a few little people gathering at the corner spot is community, then you don't know what it is. I taught, and I would do whole modules on community. And we don't have it, and this is another example, and this happens all over this town. And you can vote this in and get this really unattractive looking thing, and then everyone will say, oh my God, what is this? And everyone's like, oh, we didn't have any choice, we had to do it. Well, you did have a choice, and just remember, this is a special permit, and there's nothing special about it. Thank you.
Just to clarify one comment, Brackett Road does run behind both Douglas and Greenhalls Road, does it not?
Yeah, but you can, Douglas and Greenhouse is a U, you have to go in and out those two streets. Brackett Road is blocked at the end of Douglas. You can't go.
Why is it blocked?
It always has been that way, there's a big cement thing.
Okay,
Where the pumping station is, it's always been blocked. You can't drive through there.
I mean,
The paper way.
should talk to DPW. Okay, thank you.
Okay, again, Mark Soli, thank you. Seems like a mixed bag of, it's too big, or it's just not categorized for the neighborhood, and it's, or the sign that needs to go back to drawing board, to the designer saying we made changes. Two questions. Does this fit the bylaw for height?
Yes.
Does this fit bylaw for lot dimensions?
Yes.
Thank you.
So at this point, I think we've heard public comment. We only have 3 members of the planning board tonight, so, and it is a special permit which would require 4 votes. Obviously, we've heard a lot of comments about the project, and really, I think it is appropriate to continue the public hearing to the next meeting, which would be scheduled for December 12th, which is a Thursday, unless there's any more comments from the public, which we could entertain. However, I think it's appropriate to continue this to December 12th.
I agree. I think we should continue the public discussion until the next meeting. So, I guess, in agreement. Okay?
Can I entertain a motion, please?
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so 12 Pond Street will be continued to December 12th, which is the next planning board meeting, and only planning board meeting scheduled for the holiday season. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, it is 7:45, past 7:45, so we'll move on to the second item on our agenda this evening, which is a public hearing regarding a zoning bylaw amendment. So, the Ashland Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Thursday, November 14th, 2019, at 7:15 PM in the Board of Selectmen Meeting Room, second floor, Ashland Town Hall, 101 Main Street, Ashland, Massachusetts, to see if the town will vote to amend Chapter 282 zoning of the Ashland zoning bylaws. To see if the town will vote to amend Ashland zoning bylaws to replace all gendered references to Board of Selectmen with Select Board, or take any other action relative thereto. Parties wishing to be heard in this matter should submit comments to the planning board ahead of time and/or appear at the time and place indicated above.
So just town planner Peter Matchek, just to jump in here.
Excuse me, Julie, excuse me? Can you please keep conversation?
So with the planning board, so at this upcoming town meeting, which is the 20th of November, next Wednesday night, there's gonna be a couple articles on the warrant to change what was formerly known as the Board of Selectmen to the Select Board.
within the zoning bylaws, this article is proposed to change any reference that exists within the zoning bylaws to the select board. There's two sets of bylaws. There's the general bylaws and then there's the zoning bylaws. There has to be two separate articles to change, which was the Board of Selectmen to the Select Board in both sets of bylaws. And so this article will, I would say, make that change. That's pretty much it. It's fairly simple. And it will just kind of correct that issue that is within the zoning bylaws.
So it aligns language in the zoning bylaws with already amended language in the town bylaws?
Correct. It will align the language within the the general bylaws and the zoning bylaws. Mhm.
Okay.
So therefore, I think I would entertain a motion to support this change.
So I think before we make a motion to support the change, it is a public hearing, so I think, does anybody from the public have any comment they'd like to make on this topic? Okay. Seeing nobody, Peter, go ahead.
So seeing nobody from the public, I would entertain a motion to support this article as presented.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that passes.
What other hard stuff do we have?
Moving on, we have an A&R application for 320 Pond Street. Just to set the table, a few planning board meetings ago, the planning board voted site plan approval for this site. That decision has gone through the 20-day appeal period. In this A&R, as presented, will create the lot, the parcel, which therefore will be sold to the owners and/or applicants of the restaurant. And so mechanically, we are creating the lot to make that property transaction. So I will hand it over to, the representative from 320 Pond Street.
For the record, my name is Brandon Barry. I'm here with Bowler Engineering on behalf of the applicant. I think Peter did a great job summarizing what we're doing. It's an A&R, so we're taking one conforming lot, and we're going to split it out into two conforming lots so that the sale of the restaurant building can be transferred to the owner of that new business. The only thing notable is there is some Pond Street improvements that DOT is making. There's a slight taking. You'll notice a hatched area at the frontage of the parcel. Even when that taking occurs, we will still meet frontage and area requirements. I think that really summarizes what we're doing. I'd welcome any questions you may have.
So this is the same property line that we've been saying on this project as it's come before the planning board?
Yes, we've had it included in all the plans that we were preparing, so the designs for that restaurant were considering this line ultimately.
So it's unchanged from the plans that we approved?
Correct.
You guys have any comments or questions?
I feel like we went through it extensively
Yep.
before.
Okay. Is this there's no public comment on this, right? Is it
No,
AR?
it's
Yep.
an A&R.
Okay.
These are two conforming lots. It's mechanically creating one additional lot. I have the plan that the planning board can sign,
Great.
but I would just entertain a motion to approve the A&R as submitted.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you so much.
Have a good night.
Moving down the agenda, we do have a discussion on co-urbanize. Emma, Assistant Planner Emma Snelling has done a great job, I would say, of putting up all of the information that is coming in on the applications up on the town website. We've also embedded a Google map, and so all points of reference on all the applications can be linked geographically. This is one of the things that Co-Urbanize did do. Co-Urbanize has a fee. Co-Urbanize has a fee. I think we've all been talking about it. There's a fee to the town, which is annual, which does increase annually, I would say. And I think the number one thing is the town's website, which we already have, which is used by all other departments. We do have the ability to post meeting material, which is really what Co-Urbanize has been used here in Ashland in the past for. So with that said, I think Emma and myself have been looking at utilizing the town website a little bit more, and then also getting away from Co-Urbanize, because in my eyes, it makes sense to use the town website. We do have it, we pay for it, and not really double charge, I would say, the citizens of Ashland for the Co-Urbanize as a tool. So I'm still having some internal conversations with the decision makers here in Town Hall concerning Co-Urbanize. And that's pretty much my update on, Co-Urbanize and where that stands. We have been pulling all the data down from the website, the Co-Urbanize website. So if the town does decide to move away from the Co-Urbanize website, we do have the ability to maintain and save all that hard data that has been collected over the years. But Co-Urbanize does cost to the tune of around $5,000 to the town on an annual basis. So with that said, I think it's a saving mechanism that I would be trying to, that's on the table here to I would say, transfer and really establish a stronger presence on the planning board page concerning ongoing projects and loading the data and the material onto the town website. And so that's where it stands today. I'm still having some internal conversations with management concerning the further use of Co-Urbanize. So that's agenda item number 5. Moving forward, agenda item number 6, the next planning board meeting is scheduled as stated for December 12th. At the next meeting, we'll be presenting the board with a 2020. I feel like that's it was a long time ago that I even thought about 2020, but a 2020 schedule. And just to keep everybody on the same schedule, I would say, planning board meetings will be proposed for the second and fourth Thursday of each month, as always done in the past historically. So we're not proposing to move away from that. However, we're just looking to outline, the 12-month calendar schedule moving forward. The other items on the agenda here, reports from the town planner or the board, I think it's business as usual since the last planning board meeting. And then I would just hand it over to the board to review the minutes from October 10th.
One question, are you going to be present at the town meeting for the presentation of these zoning issues?
Correct, I will be present, and I will be making a presentation on the 2 articles proposed, speaking to any questions or concerns, or really what the planning board was looking to do, and highlighting when the public hearings were and the advertisements, were posted within the Patriot Ledger and sent to abutting towns. But I will be at town meeting and hopefully making it short and sweet at the microphone.
Cool. Thank you, Peter. All right. So we have October 10th to review?
Correct. We have October 10th in the packet.
Great. Peter, on the NSTAR, we voted, we we voted for the approval in the next meeting on the 24th?
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you. So the 81, never mind, I'm good.
Went down to Framingham, one small little island with the cannibals.
Oh, yeah? No. Do I speak? Okay. When? 12 now? They kind of closed, they kind of continued it. Yeah. Of all the people that were gonna speak out, they would have to reopen the hearing. So mechanically, it's just. I would ask you to say it on December 12th.
I think there's just a couple spelling.
Hey, what do you got?
I believe Kathy Rooney spells her name with a C
Okay.
and not a K.
What line is that on?
45.
Good catch.
And Cecil report, Cecil does not have an E at the end in line 130 and line 135.
130.
I'll double check.
134. Cecil. 139. Gotcha.
Yeah, to C.
Okay. Oh, Kathy.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Awesome. Okay.
Any other changes? Okay. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Seconded?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0.
Prior, before we close the meeting for the night, I do just want to recognize that today, the planning office on November 14th, we did receive a letter from, we received a letter from council concerning the 120 Chestnut Street A&R application, and they have requested withdrawal the A&R application without prejudice. And so therefore, since we do not hear this, I would just like to have the planning board recognize this letter into the record and accept the withdrawal without prejudice, please.
So, do you want to vote or just simply acknowledge it?
I would just acknowledge it and just vote, acknowledge it and then vote to accept the request as stated.
So, we have this letter here requesting the withdrawal of this A&R without prejudice, which was filed on October 23rd, 2019, and this was received on November 14th, 2019. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Seconded?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much. And now I can entertain a motion to, if there's any, if there's no business by the board, to close the meeting.
So moved.
Seconded?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.